everyone. Welcome to the Mind Clash podcast, the first attempt under the new layout and all of the videos and the boxes and everything is working on the screen. Hopefully, TM. And Kale steps away immediately.
Oh, hey, look at that. Looks like we're up.
We're good?
Chat is disabled for this channel. What?
That doesn't seem right.
Did you guys ban me?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Welcome to the chat. Okay. That was weird.
Who's cold?
Am I quiet to everybody else?
Sound good to me.
Sounds
Okay.
good to me.
Okay, so we've confirmed we're live and no gremlins.
Who start? Am I starting it? Who runs this show?
No one runs the show, but you can take the reins tonight. You can actually talk.
All right, beautiful. All right, give a moment of silence. All right, hello everybody. This is Kale Decadence, and you are listening / watching the Mind Clash podcast. I'm actually able to do some video and some wonderful audio. People can hear my voice tonight. So joining me as always is our good friend Mayor Dud, and we have some special guests today, Ash Tarathi and Zendane.
How's it going?
It is going. So tonight we're going to have a pretty good talk about lore, amongst other things. But first, let's get some intros out of the way. Go ahead, Ash.
All right. Well, greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ash Sharathi, and I am a blogger, YouTuber, streamer, podcaster for EVE Online with the sole mission of putting EVE into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. I am also the CEO of Aderon Robotics, the premier corporation for Galente Alpha clones.
All right, welcome. And Zendane?
Hello, everyone. My name is Zendane. I'm the creator of the Eve Reader podcast, which is a project that turns the lore and backstory of Eve into audiobooks. All available on YouTube channel and also as MP3 files. You can download them. You can listen to them while you're doing long drives or doing the dishes or what have you. It's a nice way to be able to get involved in the lore and the rich history that CCP has given the Eve universe.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I listened to most of the shows or most of the stories on the way from the States to Afghanistan. So thank you.
I'm going to have to chime in here and say to our audience that may have never heard Zendane talk, please resist the urge to immediately turn off this station and go listen to everything he's ever said, because, man, his voice is amazing. And he does all of the audio work for that podcast, which is exceptional.
Well, thank you. Although I would like to say that I don't do all of the work.
You're right.
A couple of episodes where I've been able to have people come and give guest voices. It really helps bring the Chronicles alive.
In fact, one of the most important chronicles to the current lore, which we'll go into in a little bit, Inheritance, you had a whole set of people that helped you out with that, right?
That's right.
I must admit that I haven't read any of the Chronicles, but I've listened to as many of the Zendane Chronicles as possible.
I'm pretty sure if it isn't done by Zendane, I haven't read it either.
Well, then I'll take that as success, because if it's getting the lore out to more players and more people, then that's just fantastic.
Exactly. So, like I said, tonight we've got some lore lined up, but first we're going to talk about some Eve news. Yesterday? Yesterday for you guys, 2 days ago for me, was the '07 show. I have not watched it. Who has seen it?
I watched the whole thing.
Anything good come out of it?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I went into it expecting to see a couple of announcements, or at least maybe the next bit of tidbits. But we did learn that there's actually going to be. They've already scheduled the next '07 show. They have a Christmas special on the 18th. This episode was much more kind of subdued. It was more a reflection of Ascension, talking about the stats of that success, and assuring us that basically their entire December patch and that entire throughput time is dedicated towards fixing any problems that might arise from Ascension, as opposed to doing the next thing. So there was a really good video on the Astero as the ship spotlight, and a pretty funny battle between CCP and the EVE-NT judges, or not, or commentators, in which CCP Fozzie demonstrated that he does in fact play this game.
Yeah, NT got rolled.
They got, well, to be fair, about halfway through the selection process, I was like, I don't know if EVE-NT is going to be able to get through this. They pretty much got beaten in the banning phase.
Is that new?
Awesome sauce. Okay, so there's going to be December updates. I probably need to look that stuff up, maybe prepare myself a little bit. But what kind of updates are we looking at in December? Sorry for the helicopter noise.
So far, the only thing that I've seen is the bringing in of the Dix. So Dix will be out in December.
Come again?
So the the new what has happened is they have decided that Defender missiles for years have been one of the least used mechanics in the game. And so instead of trying to make them work in their current role, they're actually going to change their role completely to be a kind of cooldown based anti-bomb chafe mechanism. So you fire it once a minute and it shoots a random missile or a missile at a random bomb, and then that bomb is neutralized. But if there's 5 bombs and 5 people hit it, each person's missile will pick a random one. So they all could potentially pick the same one. Or maybe 5 of them will fire it off on one bomb, and then the rest of the bombs come off. There's all sorts of different counterplays to it. But it will only be fit to destroyers, and it looks like command ships are going to have a buff to their cycle rate. So more utility value being given to destroyers, in particular command destroyers.
And oh, how the Command Destroyer is an amazing ship class. And give it all the toys, please. All the toys.
It's so good because basically it says that if you want to really try to push your skill as a pilot, your skill as a pilot becomes a value add to the fleet. And everything that the Command Destroyer does has a little bit of a skill-based mechanism to it, which I really like.
Yeah, and there is just so much gameplay. Me and a corp mate spent 2 hours just playing with different techniques and strategies using Command Destroyers. Only 2 Command Destroyers, not even 3 Command Destroyers. And we were coming up with cool new techniques, trying out new tactics, and we hadn't even really played with command bursts or the Dix modules. We just started scratching the surface with sabers, and there's all kinds of other cool things you can do.
A Hictor plus a Command Destroyer that is working in tandem can basically reduce a kiter's effective range to be able to not be scrammed to a 20-kilometer buffer in 100 kilometers. So they have to be somewhere between 40 and 60 kilometers. Otherwise, you got them.
Nice.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Okay, my video apparently went off, but oh well. At least I got audio.
I haven't seen myself move on the video for a while either. So I think it's actually Skype that just kind of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I have been frozen in dorkier looking pictures. I'm okay with this one.
It was on my side, but I think I fixed it. Let's see if I can get Kale back in here.
it's going to use anyways. Well, while we're figuring that out. Oh, there I am. So,
Your mic, Kale.
all right, done. All right,
Hooray.
so that's what happened in the 07 show. There's other things that are happening, or has it happened yet? Is the Frostline event live?
Yeah, this is one that's kind of a lot of speculation right now. I guess I'll just start from what we know. Last year, there was a Frostline event, which was not the kind of event that I would expect to reoccur. In
Right.
contrast to the Crimson Harvest, the Crimson Harvest is like a holiday where the San Sabek and the Blood Raiders decide to go harvest their blood, right? So,
Right.
so it's an annual kind of rhythm. Whereas
whereas
Frostline was the reclaiming of the Ore Corporation by Upwell from the Serpentis Corporation. So it's not like something that's going to happen annually, right? But there is the Yuli celebration, which is the celebration of the signing of the peace treaty, which is of course what YC1 is based off of and all that stuff. I believe that's what I've managed to suss out about it. And there is some skins that we have found in the data files, in particular on Singularity, which look really, really cool. A couple things about them: they're basically dark blue in the front, and then they gradiate to white in the back. And across the whole thing, they have kind of this mid to dark blue mottled spots all over it, like a leopard pattern. And it's called the Glacial something. I can't remember off the top of my head. Now, what's interesting is that I would have suspected that the Crimson Harvest skins would have dropped during the Crimson Harvest event, but they didn't. They were giveaways during that time period, right? So, and what actually dropped in the sites were the Cold Iron skins. So CCP kind of haven't necessarily set a precedence of doing this exactly the way that we would expect them to, but it does look like what will happen is we're going to have some sites like we've had before, and the prize to these sites are going to be these skins, which the other really unique thing about them, compared to previous skins, is that they are all 4 races, and it looks like every ship that an alpha pilot will be able to have access to. So you're talking about Tech 1 frigates, cruisers, and destroyers.
Nice. So not only are we going to have the Frostline events, but we're also going to have the Santa Spirit thing, which apparently is in its 5th annual rendition of that. I could pull up the forum post. Does anybody know more about that? Because I've never been involved in that.
Yeah, so every year CCP gives out holiday presents, right? And there usually is 1 or maybe 2 practical items. Like I think maybe they've given out Genolutions before, and various other little things like that. But the majority of the holiday presents are actually basically a series of inside jokes, nods to the community, or otherwise commemorative items. And they're just little fun, little lore things that gets given out throughout the whole thing. They've done some sort of Christmas giveaway every year that I can remember, so at least 5 years. But yeah, it's usually not like a huge thing. I honestly expect to see Senesis's potentially be part of that giveaway, because if they give away something right before Christmas, they often have that be part of the Christmas event as well. But honestly, they have iterated on these concepts of how to do these giveaways so wildly in the past. It could be anything. It could be anything from us having to go to a specific website in order to unlock something, or whatever they want to do.
I really feel like they should add the Gnosis, the Senesis, and the Apothos into the Society of Conscious Thought store, even though that's a really crappy location to go do missions. At least if it was in the game, people could farm it.
Yeah, I think that mechanically breaks the Gnosis as a ship. I think one of the funny things, if you think back to the Incarna days, there's the idea of the Golden Scorpion and the golden items. In essence, the Gnosis has allowed them to create a golden item that players accept. And it's literally a golden ship. So this is an item that only is basically produced out of magic. Even when players build it, it takes 1 trit. When it's refined, it takes 1 trit. It takes no skills. It can use any weapon system. It is the ultimate giveaway prize. And so because of that, its value comes from the fact that we do not know how often it will be provided for, but it is only provided by the grace of CCP, which makes it an incredibly interesting item to be like the top ship for alpha clones, for example, because they're going to demand consumption. So I think that giving it a clear path of farming would actually be worse for the experiment, as it were, because then it would just be another item, right? It would just be like Stratioses.
So you think better attached to seasonal events, or CCP watches the availability or the price of the Synesis? Because if it becomes too rare, it's going to go up in price, and it's going to lock new players out of using it for that pure reason.
I sincerely believe that we're going to see it be part of a retention reward system as we move into a more free-to-play philosophy. Perhaps a certain period of time, being a Omega clone, you will get bonus blueprints for these kinds of things. But barring that, who knows? They could do whatever they want with it. It's just, that's the point. Like, as a designer, it's kind of nice to have this item, this pocket item that you can just play with if you need to.
Yeah, I love those holiday items, but there's also one other thing, which was actually what I was trying to get at, is the Santa Spirit thing, which is apparently on December 14th, there's going to be some sort of events. We have a battle, which is details to be released later, a ship scramble, where pilots are given some warning, and you have to find some helpers, I guess. And then a can hunt, a can explosion, and a frigate race for prizes, all put on by Santa Spirit.
Oh, so that's a totally separate thing. That's not a CCP thing. That's a player run.
Right. I'm pretty sure that's a player.
Are there elves hiding in Jita and Amar?
Well, more than likely, there probably is elves hiding somewhere in Jita. 4-4, obviously. But for those of you that don't know, if you go onto the EVE Online forums and you try and search for Santa Spirit, and I think the way I found it was it showed it on the launcher. It said something about it. I just clicked it. But yeah, December 14th is the 5th annual Christmas giveaway, and all these fun scheduled events.
I know in my corp we're also doing a Secret Santa. I don't know if anybody else is doing any themed stuff around their corps or alliances.
There also is there's an EVE-wide Secret Santa every year. I think it's probably too late to register, but I think it's done through Reddit. I did it like last year.
Oh, not to mention Mike's Operation
Magic
Northern
School
Troll.
Bus. Oh yeah.
No,
yeah.
Northern Troll. Can't forget that. So make sure we gotta find that address and start sending cards to CCP.
Yeah, so Operation Northern Troll is kind of the semi-organized effort by Mike Azariah, who is a former CSM guy and the driver of the Magic School Bus, who basically, like I said, tries to semi-organize us to send Christmas cards to CCP to show our appreciation, because winter in Iceland sucks.
Oh yeah.
Also, incidentally, speaking of winter and CCP, if you guys go look at the old CCP winter videos, one of the things that was really cool about CCP in the old days was that they were really big on showcasing their heritage, and this specifically came out during the Christmas time. So there's these great videos about the Icelandic tradition of the not Christmas elves, but they have like these troll-like goblins that come and harass kids that are naughty, and so they made videos where all of the CCP devs are like dressed up as these guys, and it like tells their story, and that was how they did their giveaways for Christmas presents over the years, or over the days, was that we had the different presents from each of the different goblins each day. So, but the videos for those are really interesting. I think that the Icelandic culture and kind of the tongue-in-cheek humorous approach of CCP's videos in combination with that makes some pretty decent footage.
Cool. Yeah. If you could later send me the links for some of those, and I'll put them on to mindclash.live and put some information about it. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I kind of really want to sing happy birthday to our #1 fan.
Oh, is Busing's birthday #1?
It is Busing's birthday.
And a 1 and a 2 and a 1, 2, 3. Happy
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Busing. Happy birthday to you.
The mumble lag is real.
That was
Let's
beautiful.
never do that again.
That was perfect, guys. That was 100% perfect.
That was almost as awful as the time that Scott Van Cleef tried to do his "Let It Go" Eve parody song on Podside.
We'll workshop that. We'll have it good and down by next week.
Beautiful. Anywho, so just the other day, just keeping with the script here, just the other day, I did a 15-minute interview with one of the alpacas. So an alpha player, pretty good 15-minute interview if you haven't checked it out yet. But I think alpacas or alphas are actually doing quite well. How do you guys agree with that?
I think they're doing pretty well. I bumped into one a couple days ago. It was at the end of my artillery, and unfortunately he did not make it. But then I messaged him and was like, sorry about your loss. Let me tell you about Nullsec. It's a dangerous place. You should come here when you're ready. Here's 25 mil for your 2 mil Condor. Here's some groups that you should talk to. And then he had decided to ask me some really personal questions, like my age and where I'm from.
Age, sex, location?
Yeah, and then his biggest question that he asked, it wasn't about overview or like how to get better at this game or where to make money. Just how do you balance work and Eve?
I mean, that's a good question.
I mean, he's definitely asking the wrong kind of person.
Step one, get a job in IT that doesn't give a shit if you play Eve while at work.
Oh man, that'd be so nice. Well, I mean, I think I'm probably the best person to answer that because here I am up in Afghanistan and I'm able to still continue to do podcasts. I sometimes play Eve when I get a solid connection. This is the best connection I've had in weeks. But I mean, it's possible. Just if it's important to you and you want to keep doing it. I used to wake up at 4:30 in the morning back home just so I could play for an hour, do my PI before going to work.
I mean, I've hit my ping quota or my PAP quota this month easily, but it wasn't easy.
Well, I've been playing quite a bit, especially with alphas, and just for some numbers, Adoran Robotics has more than doubled in size with 94 new members since the 15th, and we have 90 people logging in the last 24 hours. So it's been pretty incredible for us.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Have you deciphered how many are Black Legion spies?
Well, what's one of the interesting things is that we've seen a wonderful amount of cross-pollination. We have a bunch of just, normal alphas, which are, new players who have somehow wandered into one of my tweets or one of our posts on Reddit or whatever and get sucked in. But then we also have a lot of people like Caleb from the Talking Stations show over there and a few other people that are fairly high profile on TweetFleet who maybe have never done faction warfare before and are just using it as a really good example or excuse to do so. So they just make an alpha as kind of a separate challenge. You no longer need to carve out some resources or some training time for this because the alphas are free. So you just go, oh yeah, now I have a faction warfare alt, and it just so happens to go into Aileron Robotics, because they're specifically taking care of faction warfare, and we know Ash. So I'd say that we have at least 10 or so people who are part of the corporation just to check out faction warfare, but are really from somewhere else, and then a lot of other new guys.
Yeah, I believe it. I myself made a separate alpha account just so I can help out a couple of the guys that are here in Afghanistan with me learning. So, I mean, I guarantee everyone who's a veteran player has an alpha.
The other really cool thing, which I didn't predict, I didn't see the writing on the wall, but once I saw it in action, it was amazing, was the Buddy Link. The Buddy Link change, which they snuck in at the last minute, the 250,000 skill points. So you get 250,000 skill points plus the 80,000 skill points for doing the MPE, which takes like 20, 30 minutes once you know what you're doing. You just smash your way through it. And that gives you 330,000 SP. That's basically any one thing you want. That is a pretty decent frigate pilot. That is a functional cruiser pilot. That is a damn fine Gnosis, because you don't have to train any ship skills.
Yeah, it's a huge bonus to a new player for sure.
Well, not just a new player, but what I'm saying is that, it used to be that there is kind of that terror where if I start training this thing, it means I'm not training this other thing, because I can only train one thing at a time per account. But now that you can have as many of these alphas as possible, you can be like, I feel like doing, I want to learn missile disruption, or I feel that we need a missile disruption alt. And you don't have to feel like you're not training towards your primary thing anymore.
Are you finding that most, not veterans starting in alpha, but new player alphas are starting more than one character at the same time?
Yeah, the conventional wisdom. I think I heard that Waffles is telling. It might have not been Waffles. It might have been Pandemic Horde. One of them newbie organizations is actually recommending everybody make at least a Caldari and a Galente clone. So the wisdom of having multiple clones to use is permeating.
I mean, it's only logical. I mean, if it's free, why not just make a bunch of accounts?
Yeah, and a lot of free-to-play people, they're not stupid, and the free-to-play is successful for people that have more time than money, right? So what that means is that the people that are coming in are actually very well researched. And especially since they haven't really started the main marketing campaign, most of the alphas that we have seen so far are people who have kind of were aware of this Eve thing and now are looking into it now that it's free, or maybe even have wanted to do the free thing or Eve thing but couldn't, but now can because it's free. So it'll be interesting to see what quality of people that we get once we start seeing like YouTube commercials or something like that.
Now, wasn't the first YouTube commercial the Asher Kerrigan My Eve Story commercial?
That is the first in what it appears to be a new series of videos, or of highlighting our stories, which looks to be the way that they're going to go about this marketing campaign. Instead of selling the universe, they're actually selling us, which is kind of interesting.
I am not for sale, Ashtarothi.
Well, apparently your story is. A lot of people, I think that a lot of people have actually been unfair about the commercial. I'm glad that you brought it up, because, like, I think a lot of people look at it from the side of the predator and think, oh man, you're telling a story about a person being dumb or whatever. But the key is that what we've learned is those kinds of experiences retain players, right? So players that go through that kind of experience actually are more likely to stay in the game than people that haven't. And so if that's true, then maybe there's something about telling that story that will help entice people to want to check it out. So it's actually a really good story from an outsider, because you listen to that and you're told two things. First of all, you're told that this is a real hard game that people will mess with you about, which is kind of a challenge. But then you also can realize that that person that did that thing is also a person, which makes that a valid thing to do in this game. And so you're really showcasing kind of the complexity of what makes Eve beautiful, while at the same time highlighting some very key things that, like what would be the one thing you would like for every person to know if they joined Eve? Like if you could just do one thing and be like, if in order to join Eve, you have to check a box that says that you know this thing, what would it be? And the answer to that is don't fly something that you're not afraid to lose, right? That is the number one mantra that has been in Eve since before I have been here. And you know what? It's in the commercial now. So every person that comes in is going to have that bit of wisdom with them, which is going to set them up for at least some kind of success. So they're going to do better than that story, and they're going to win and get past that, and then get messed up after.
I also am glad that the hand holding is towards this is what's probably going to happen. You're probably going to lose all your stuff. Whereas the pirate is not handheld towards how do you get to that point. That you have to figure out how to get there. And that's really true to how Eve is, right? You have to find your way into piracy. You just can't be handed piracy. Eve PvP has never been easy, right?
Right. And although this is a bit tangential, have you guys seen Rick Javix's My Eve Story series?
I have not.
He's made a series of images of key Eve people, and it's like posters. So he's got like 6 or 7 lines for each person, and he's got Minxie and Mittens and himself and the Space Pope, and really just like in a few words powerfully conveying these different people's stories. And at the bottom the tagline is are you harder than Eve? And I think they're brilliant.
Yeah, I think I saw the one for himself, but I didn't get a chance to view the other ones. But yeah, that's really cool. Because I think every Eve story for every one of us is quite different, and any of those stories can be pursued by a new player.
Interesting thing that when I was talking to that guy in my interview the other day, we all know, I mean, it's been in the tutorials forever, was that they had the, you're going to die. There's that one mission where you go out there and die. And he said he actually didn't like that. Not he understood it, but he thought it was too pushed. You know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting because that's actually in the career agents, right? So in the advanced military career missions, there are 2 missions, Angel of Mercy and one other, in which Last Stand, I think it is, in which you have to die. One of them, your ship actually just blows up. The other one, you're told to stand and fight until you die. But that series of quest line was created without the MPE death in mind, obviously, because it predated that. So at the end of the MPE, you are supposed to stay and fire the final shot and sacrifice yourself. And so I'm not sure exactly which death you're talking about, the one that's in the MPE or the one that's part of the career agents. I agree that the one that was part of the MPE does feel a bit kind of like shoehorned in. Like it's really fast.
Yeah, so. It was the NPE one specifically. He said that it was just like he understood it. He understood the concept behind it, but he was just like, okay, I get it, but it seems kind of like forced, you know?
I really wish, or I hope, or I think, or maybe it'd be cool if they could do like a polish on the story, because I think that the weakness of CCP Ghost not be knowing the story intimately himself made it so that some of the story of the MPE didn't quite jive with our understanding of the universe. Like the whole, you become an independent capsuleer, are now you're immortal, even though but that isn't something that's given in the ship. You would have to already be a capsuleer. There's a lot of really confusing stuff in that moment, and the problem is that if a new player asks us about it, we don't really have good answers because it is kind of muddled.
Yeah. All right, so going for about 20 minutes, and that kind of segues into what our main topic is. So, the reason we have Ashtarothi and Zendane. Zendane, are you still there? Because you haven't talked a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm still here. Just been listening.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, Ashtarothi is somewhat of our lore aficionado. I don't want to call you expert because you yourself don't claim to be an expert. You just really love the lore.
That's right. I say
Uh,
that I don't. I'm not a lore expert. I just hang around with a lot of lore experts, and I've managed
yeah,
to absorb a lot.
yeah. So you're definitely an aficionado, and Zendane is here because he reenacts some of the Eve lore. So the questions we have for these guys is, what is lore? Why is it important? And pretty much where can you find it? So for those of you who don't know what lore is, for new players, lore is history. It's the life and the stories behind the characters, behind the game. So, Ash, if you want to give a little insight on some lore basics.
Yeah, I would say that the lore is all of the information that kind of describes why the universe is the way it is and how the universe is in EVE Online. So, in that case, the lore represents not only some physical laws, like the function of FTL communication, warp drive technology, Stargate technology, and how the empires came to be, but also is kind of what is happening to the universe as we do our things. Because in Eve, the universe itself is a living thing, supposedly. There are humans, also known as baseliners, that are kind of off doing their own stuff, while we as capsuleers are dealing with whatever it is that interests us. And so one of the interesting things about the story is that while people may feel that they're not really into the lore, what's or they're not really a role player. That's one of the funny things I hear is that, oh, I'm not really into role play. Being an Eve means that by definition you are role playing because you are playing your role within the universe. Even if your role is an aloof demigod in a starship that thinks that he's above the concerns of mortals. You know, that idea of like the lore is not important, or I don't really pay attention to it, or my stuff, the imperial or the Capsuleer Wars are far more important. Like that is just part of the mentality of being who we are. But beneath the surface, there's all kinds of other things going on. There is, the Mimitar Republic who are trying to find their way in the universe. Not quite no longer slaves of the Amar, and now having rejected the democracy of the Galente, the Mimitar continue to struggle to figure out who they are and how to free their allies. The Caldari state just recently had a really kind of interesting dictator basically seize control of the state for several years and bring them nearly to the brink of war once again, like full scale war with the Galente once again. The lore explains why the Titan was flying above Luminaire when Dust 514 and Eve Online teamed up together to shoot it down. The story explains, or the lore is about the Empress and the Imperial successions and that whole transition as the Drifters assassinated the previous Empress of the Amar Empire. So while the lore doesn't necessarily like impact the moment to moment gameplay of the universe, our moment to moment gameplay impacts the lore. And I think that that's interesting because it's one of the more unique characteristics of Eve Online as a video game. There's a lot of games that have lore, but Eve challenges you to become an immersive part of that lore as opposed to an observer or a watcher like a lot of other video games do. And that's what the lore is and how it works in Eve.
Yeah, and like how much do you think? Well, I mean, how much do you? Yeah, how much do you think is probably CCP constructed lore, and how much of it is player generated? Because I'm going to say it's a lot more player generated.
I think a lot of it is player generated. So in particular, CCP right now is run by a lot of guys who either are from World of Darkness, which is a very popular tabletop RPG and LARP system, or are LARPers themselves. Like CCP Siegel actually once talked about how she used to be really big into LARP and all that stuff, which is live action role play, which is the idea that there's kind of a story master that makes sure the balls keep rolling, but then the people as part of the experiment kind of interact with each other in order to generate the story. And so that's kind of the way that Eve's lore operates on like a day-to-day basis, is that catalysts for events occur and then players respond to those catalysts however they feel like.
Yeah, I think a perfect example of that is Carolyn's Star. So that was really cool. So you had an event, Caroline, a character in Eve, who likes to go around taking pictures, saw a star event happening, and we turned it into a huge lore thing.
Yeah, so there's these moments when I try to tell people about Eve that I have to pause and say, no, I'm not kidding, this really happened. So
Yeah.
Caroline Grace is a space trucker. She does freight, I'm pretty sure. And she literally noticed that one of the stars in the sky was bigger than yesterday. Like, that's how precise it was. And so took pictures of it, and what happened was a series of events that kind of unfolded over the course of a year, as the star got bigger. And you can actually still see it if you look to the galactic northeast from most of the cluster. You'll see this greenish O with a line through it, and that nebula is actually a detonated star in the Jovian cluster. And the coolest thing about it is that CCP gave us nothing as like a hint that anything was going on. There was a dev blog, or there was a news post that there was some there was weird sleeper activity, which was funny because it was at the same time that they were rebalancing Blue Loot. So they like made this post that was like, oh yeah, sleeper activity changes, and so there's this extra interest in Blue Loot and the prices go up. And so I was like, okay, whatever. And then it turns out like all of this happens, and it turns out that like there's actually like a lot of stuff going on, and there's this big mystery that it took us a long time to really figure out what was happening at all. What happened to the star, what are the drifters, what are the Jovian observatories, and even today we still mostly have guesses. And after about a year of playing around with this, they gave us a new chronicle called Inheritance, which kind of led us to the next level of answers and questions. And that's basically where we're at now.
Yeah, so exactly what is Inheritance, Zendane?
Inheritance was sort of the magnum opus that one of the authors over at CCP, CCP Delegate Zero, wrote in order to be able to answer many of the long-standing questions that we've had within the game. What's the origin of the Sleepers? What happened to the Jovians? What's the story with a group called the Society of Conscious Thought? It was a very long chronicle that wrapped all these up, and the beautiful thing is it actually answered many of our questions, but it gave us new questions. What's going to happen now? What with the Jovian out, almost literally out of the picture? What's going to happen going forward with the drifters, with the sleepers, with the Amar Empress? Now, granted that one actually that storyline has continued onward, but Inheritance gave us so many answers, but also gave us so many questions. And just touching on something that Asherathi said in regards to Caroline Star, that was a big mystery. We just knew that something had happened, but in the Chronicle Inheritance, it actually goes into what it was. And I don't know if I want to give a lot of spoilers, but long story short, there was something just absolutely incredible over around that star, and something went really strange with it, and it created things actually that we see even today, the wormholes, what's been going on with the Jovians and so forth. It answers so many questions, but it even gives us more to talk about.
Yeah, pretty much. The bottom line is, if there's whether you're a new player or an older player, if there's something at Eve you always wondered, why is it that happens, or why do we do that? chances are you can probably find it in some sort of Eve lore and or the Chronicles.
Mhm.
Yeah, and paying attention to the lore actually really helps put into context what is going on in the current story, right? So right now, even with the Alpha clones, we see a lot of movements with the Sisters of Eve, who provided the technology to the empires for Alpha clones, and the Society of Conscious Thought, who provided the technology for injectors and extractors, for skill extractors and injectors. So and you know, there's also been some movements with the Serpentis, and there's things going on in the universe, and we'll see these little drop-ins here and there. um, but if you don't know what's going on underneath the surface, you may not necessarily be able to draw all of the lines. So there's kind of this ever unfolding, kind of rewarding story of interactions between these character actors over the last 13 years.
Yeah. Got a question from the audience. From I don't know if it's Fungus or Effingus. He was wanting to know the origin of our names as players. I know there's some etymology behind like the Caldari and Galente and Amar and Mimitar names, but specifically for us, anybody?
Like our character names.
Character names, yeah.
Ashtarothi was actually a mixture of Ashtaroth or Ashtar, which is like Ishtar, like the feminine goddess,
Yeah,
primordial feel, and then
yeah.
Ashtaroth, which is one of the demons of the Goetia, I'm pretty sure. But either way, I mixed it all together and put an I at the end to feminize it, because Ashtarothi was a female character, because she was originally a priestess of the Amar faith before she became an immortal.
Yeah, let me tell you about my name. So, Kale Decadence, I've actually used this name basically for any video game that I've ever played, but it started when I did Star Trek based play by email role playing games, which that is some pretty intense stuff. That's super nerd.
That's pretty high up there. I did
Yeah,
the old chat rooms and muds and stuff like that, but I never did the play
yeah.
by email.
Well, for mine, I played MMOs for many years, and um, the name that I would tend to go by had a rather unfortunate abbreviation. So when I started playing Eve, I thought, well, I'm just going to go ahead and start completely new, come up with a new name, and I wanted something that sounded calm. So Zen, okay, Zen. Let's take the word Zen and see what we can add to it. And really, it was just me flipping through a dictionary and ta-da, and found something and added it to it, and that became Zendane.
Mine will reveal my dirty, dirty past, which is I used to do the Society of Creative Anachronism, which was it's kind of like LARPing, but instead of throwing fireballs, you throw shots with rattan-based weapons, and it's full contact, full violence, and yeah, it also has like a role play element where you pick a character from a period in history, and then you follow through with that persona as you develop a costume and an armor kit and a name and a history and what battle you came from, and you kind of use that to fill out your character that you live out through essentially Ren fairs, but they're more specific. And Merdud was the name that I picked from joining that group, and it's a Welsh name from the 14th century, and it also has other uh, translations from like Iranian. I think it means lion. So it's just a cool name that I've stuck with now for all the games I play.
And the winner of the nerd contest of the evening goes to Merdud.
I know
I
you're
used
all
to say
jelly.
that I did the SCA as an excuse to just dress up like a pirate and go off and drink until I can't see anymore.
I mean, that was definitely 90% of it. But
Yeah,
I also
I've never heard somebody like describe the SCA so formally before, but
I've actually never heard of that. So cool. Thanks. All right. Cool. So we talked about lore, what it is, why it's important, and here's some interesting ways to find it. So, one way to find it, you can either just there's lore chronicles on the. It's still attached to the Eve website. Yes.
They're still attached. Unfortunately, the decision was made, what was it, about a year or two ago now, where they took down the wiki, the official EVE Online wiki.
Right.
And as a result, we have a lot of broken links. It's really unfortunate if you're going through, say, an interesting news article. The news articles are just plagued with it. And it's like, oh, hey, I could click on this to find out more. And you get a big, notice saying the Eve Wikipedia has been discontinued. Fortunately, there are some sites out there, and I'm sure we could put one in the show notes, where they have preserved the wiki, and which is great, but you still occasionally find links that just go to often to nowhere. However, one thing that CCP has done is they preserved the Eve Chronicle website. Um, Honestly, I think that there's still a couple of broken links in there, but by and large, it is still there. And that website is community.eveonline.com backstory / chronicles. And that that page is a repository of the lore within Eve. You can go there and scroll all the way down to some of these chronicles actually predate the game. I imagine they put them
Wow.
in there as flavor to get people used to the idea of what the game was going to be like, and just little short snippets. We're talking just a couple of paragraphs, little bits in the life of as somebody is going somewhere. They're almost humorous to read now because some of the things obviously either didn't make it into the game or is talking about places that you just can't find. But anyways, that page is the central lore repository in terms of stories within Eve.
Okay, yeah, and also I know on my phone for Android at least there's an app that has all the chronicles. So if you just search for Eve in your Google Play Store, you can find the Eve Chronicles thing, and it just kind of has them all laid out as well. If you want to read on the go,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody just said that they miss Evelopedia, and I do too. But supposedly CCP is working on a new replacement for it, but it still is soon. I was hoping to get it for Ascension, but it looks like we're not yet. So, but there is supposed to be at least a basic kind of lore portal coming sooner rather than later. In the meantime, the Backstage Wiki is the repository I use the most.
yeah, and then there's actually some actual novels that people can read. Two of them were written by who I'm going to say
Tony G.
Tony Gonzalez, right? Or yeah, Gonzalez.
Yep.
Yeah, so he wrote two of them. Another one I can't remember who the name was, but the ones by Tony G is the Empyrean Age, which is pretty good, like basic about what is Eve. And then the other one he did was Templar One, which was the segue into Dust 514.
That's right. It also basically answered all of the questions about the sleepers. You got to remember,
Yep.
before Templar 1, literally wormhole space and sleepers were unknown. It's just like, oh yeah, this is something that's happening now. And there's an effort called the Eric Jalon Project to figure it all out. But we really didn't know for sure until Templar 1 came out. It's also worth noting that Templar 1 is on Audible, but the other ones are not.
Yep. And then the one in between was The Burning Life, and that is a pretty good introduction and has a lot of insight into all the pirate factions. It talks a lot about Sisters of Eve, Sancha, and Garistas and all that.
Yeah, one of the main characters is actually Blood Raider, and
Yep.
it was interesting if I recall, the book starts out from the perspective of somebody within the Blood Raiders, and you realize, okay, this is another culture. They're doing things a little differently, but it's consistent. It actually makes sense.
Yeah, it was real. I've read all three of them, and I thought they were all just fantastic. And there was, even though The Burning Life was kind of a standalone, there was a little bit of crossover where they saw some of the other characters from the other books.
Hmm.
But yeah, I love them, and I would recommend anyone. And I'm telling all the guys that I'm starting helicopter.
Well, I'll say that what I've recommended for people who want to get into it, the very first thing, if you just want to check out the lore, if you've heard that lore is cool, um, I put out a lore primer on Crossing Zebras, which I put together as kind of a uh, central hub for everything I've learned and found for the lore, which includes Zendane's podcasts, the Chronicles, and all that kind of stuff. So, if you just want like a few paragraph, like welcome to the game to the universe, there's that. And then if you want to kind of know where everybody's at right now in the universe, there is the Lore Survival Guide by Mark726, which is excellent, and I recommend people to because he updates it frequently. The next tier up is the Chronicles, which you talked about right there, which you can either read or listen to Zendane's podcast. And then the next stage up is actually Eve's Source, which is a book that CCP put out in YC115, so 4 years ago now, which basically was a blow-by-blow almost nearly technical breakdown of all of the races of New Eden. So if you want to know the population of Arcturo, the second largest city in the Caldari state, or if you want to know what percentage of the Amar are actually Mimitar slaves, or if you want to know who's in charge of the Galente Federation and how he got to be in charge, Eve Source is the book for you. It also goes into all of the pirate factions and talks about what makes each pirate faction unique, what their stories are, and really gives good, at least 4 or 5 pages, many beautiful imagery and whatnot for each of the pirate factions, and then even more for of course the main races.
And then
The
you can
answer
go into
is 50% Mimitar slaves.
Yeah.
And then you can go to the next level, and you've got internet spaceships are serious business, which is a pretty good behavioral and psychological breakdown of why we're all a bunch of lunatics. And then you have the Histories of the Great Empires of Eve by Andrew Groen, which was beautifully written.
I don't know if that's lore. I mean, that's a different kind of lore, but it is
a different kind of lore.
So good.
It's a history of what happened in Eve, nonetheless.
No, you're absolutely right, and I agree that it is I mean, I would consider it lore as well, because we're all in this universe together.
I was stroking my books on stream, but
yes.
I would think that it's worth actually differentiating between the CCP-generated lore and the player-generated lore. In just one way, there are a couple of stories that are written by players that I hope I can talk about. There's where they will actually write a story and they will post it over on the CCP forums or over on other forums, and that way other people can read it. Over the years, we've actually had a couple of writing contests. There's one going on right now, in fact, called the Pod and Planet, and where players will submit lore, and their own version of lore, their own take of lore, their own stories, and some of these are actually quite good. They're definitely worth reading. Now, moving away from that, there's also the completely player-generated lore, where you have a player organization that goes up against another player organization in a place within the EVE universe, but it's not scripted by CCP, which is separate, and that's where the Empires of Eve really shine. Yeah, this is a way where we can take something that CCP has created and see how the players make it evolve.
I'm going to be a really bad person here because I can't remember who it is, but I know there's somebody that runs a contest about like Eve lore, right? Or there's maybe a collection.
If you're talking about the writing contest, that's the Pod and Planet. They do it annually.
Yes.
And in previous years, like I think Rick's book that he made included a lot of stories from Pod and Planet.
Oh yeah, how do we forget that? That's also fair to mention. Rick Javix also put out his collection of, and they're not all his stories, but he collected stories from throughout New Eden of player generated lore,
Yeah.
which you can find on PDF. I will see if I can find that somewhere, and I'll put that in the post production show notes.
And the nice thing is that CCP is getting better and better at rewarding players for engaging in the lore. One of the biggest problems that we've had is that not only is the lore very kind of convoluted and more importantly obscure, right? Because it's not, aside from a couple of chronicles that have cleared up some things definitively, a lot of the Eve story is told like a real story. So you're not given all the answers, you're just told the events, and it's up to us to kind of draw the conclusions based on that. And honestly, if we don't get the answer, CCP is historically never cared and just let us go about knowing, thinking the wrong thing or whatever, or not discovering a piece of information. Supposedly, there are still secrets from back in like CCP Drop Bear's day from like 4 years ago that just we haven't figured out yet. And so there's that certain amount of mystery and all that stuff too. But what I'm saying is that CCP has recently gotten way better at like not only directly rewarding players information, like for instance, having consistent character design in the MPE, allowing you to kind of feel like your decision of race mattered, which didn't really happen before. Little things like that, but even bigger things like CCP recognizing in-character actions from an in-universe impact. When the Drifters were the latest reports of the Drifters were posted, they actually highlighted Ark and I forget Elizabeth's group, Seraph or something like that, but they highlighted them and their efforts against the Drifters in their blog. When they made the Emergent Threats trailer, they used our voices. When they did the Drifter autopsy, that was a real autopsy report written by a player. The CCP just provided them a couple of key details that they wanted to be part of it. And so, players are actually actively building the story, as it goes on. And it's hard. And there's a lot of rabbit holes. Like, for instance, today, there's the big rabbit hole, which is, did somebody manage to find their way to Jove space? There's actually reason to suspect that maybe somebody unlocked the secret and found a way to Jove space. Probably not true, but can't rule it out right now. There's enough mysterious stuff going on with the Drifter sites and the key codes that we don't know how to make. And we know that it forms into a Stargate if you put it together right. So, all of the potential is there. So there are mysteries upon mysteries that still are for grabs.
Sorry, this podcast is over. We all have to go log on to Trank right now. Let's all come on, Caracals. Let's go. Let's go. Drifter Hive. Let's go.
Yeah, but actually, anywho, I think we've been going for about an hour. Yes.
I wanted to point out the new lore book that's coming. CCP Falcon is currently working on, which is the Frigates of New Eden.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes.
Which is going to have the technical drawings for the frigates as well as the story behind all the parts that go into why the frigates act the way they do.
So that's amazing, first of all, right? Like, the fact that we're going to have technical loadouts of basically every single frigate in New Eden, or at least a fair chunk of enough of them to make a book out of it, that's exciting enough already. But the Space Pope, who works for NASA at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, has been working for the last couple of years, from my understanding, conceptualizing a model of physics that would explain EVE Online's behaviors. And now his model of physics is going to be adopted as canon through a chapter in this book. So a real-life worker at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, I don't know if I can really call him a rocket scientist or not, but he's a fucking rocket scientist, is writing a chapter about how physics works in New Eden.
Hey guys, just want to keep on going for a little while, but unfortunately I've got to jet and do cool army things.
Hua.
Does that mean fly a jet?
But yeah, good show everyone. Keep doing what you're doing. Do great things. Fly safe.
Be safe, Kale.
Okay. We could probably wrap it towards the end.
Whatever you want to do, man. I could go for only for about a half an hour before my wife gets really grumpy.
If it's a good stopping point, it's a good stopping point.
Well, I was kind of curious about Ash. You've gone through the full new player experience, correct?
4 times now.
So what new lore is introduced in the new player experience? Because there is encounters and versus gameplay against the sleepers, correct?
Against the Seekers and the Drifters. Yes.
So what new story do they try to broach or approach in the new player experience?
They don't really like introduce too many new concepts because it was mostly written by CCP Ghost and not Delegate Zero or Falcon or whatever, although they did kind of sign off on it. So I would say it's more good enough for the lore as opposed to like an actual agent of the lore itself, if that makes sense. What it did it teaches us. We might need more information about this, but this idea of independent capsuleer status is not something that's been fleshed out before. The idea that there are capsuleers that may be capsuleers, but actually bound to their corporate or their original faction, as opposed to now freemen. That process has never been totally well defined. But this kind of locked it down a little bit more because somebody's authorized you to be a freeman because of what you've done. Another interesting one was we didn't actually know the full extent of the purpose of the Drifter Hives, although one could have theories. The idea that the Drifter Hives were literally a factory to build Seekers and Drifters, and that they're basically funneling in corpses in order to manufacture an unlimited supply of these things. Like I said, that was more confirmed than like taught, but yeah, that was part of it.
Do you find that was a good starting point for new players to come into the lore, or what new kind of avenues do you think they could add in? Do you think they could add in the pirate factions, or perhaps more of the undercurrents of the factions?
I really like the mentors. I like the 4 personalities in the mentors because not only do they kind of uphold their own values in their kind of demeanor, but also they speak about what's important to their faction. And it may sound really, it leads to some people thinking that the dialogue is really cheesy, but cheesy dialogue is very direct. And when you're trying to teach people something, you kind of want to hit them over the head with it. So, you cannot get through the NPE without understanding that the Federation love freedom, the Amar love God, the Caldari love money, and the Mimitar love themselves, like love people, that love the family, invest in themselves. Oh, my son's here. But that's cool, and I think that being able to like expand on that relationship and get more of the cultural identity of these agencies kind of locked in would be a really good thing for CCP.
No, Zendane, you do a very good job of vocalizing the Eve Chronicles. And now with the spoken, audible word missions in the new player experience, do you think this is a path they could explore for perhaps missions or epic arcs for some of the epic arcs, or perhaps new epic arcs?
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, the thing about the missions, though, is that after you've heard or after you've read through it one time, and sometimes not even that, you're just looking for the too long didn't read version, which in a way is unfortunate because some of the descriptions have done a fantastic job of explaining what you're doing with the mission, why you're here, why this is important. But we skip through that and we end up just looking at a website to see what we have to do. Um, but the thing is, putting in an audio component or putting in a greater visual component, I think that would really help with. I mean, we throw around the word immersion, but honestly, to be immersed in this, to know I need to go and do this. This is important that I go and I do this particular task, or I've got this person who's with me or looking over me or against me. So yes, I think it really would add to the depth of the missions. It would be fantastic for the epic arcs. And for those who may not know, Eve does have several epic arcs. We call them that. They're long strings of missions that take you to these just far-flung places within the universe. But unfortunately, some of them are broken. I think it would be wonderful if we could take some of those and make it so that those do become an audio-visual experience as we go through it. Of course, being able to figure out a way so you're not enjoying this. Oh gosh, this is such a wonderful thing, but I'm in nullsec, and while I'm listening and reading this or hearing this wonderful thing, somebody comes along and shoots me down. We'd have to figure a way to be able to balance that, I think. But the concept, oh, I'd love to see CCP develop that.
I think that I don't know if you guys have gotten a chance to listen to it, but we did an interview with CCP Ghost for Hydrag, and he talked at Vegas, and then he talked again at the interview about the next steps, which is like a command center, which is designed to help kind of guide people to what kind of content they could be doing at any given time. And so I think that maybe some kind of like direction provided by the mentors combined with some like practical know-how done by Aura, like as needed, to replace some of the career agents and that kind of experience might be pretty cool. Like, okay, well, you've learned the basics now. Now here's a star map of different kind of things to do, and you click on it and that says, okay, well, we need to do exploration here, so click here to find out more, so on and so forth. And so that way people can kind of explore things at their own path, and then combine that with like achievements and like a record to let you show like, these are the things that I've done, these are the things I've experienced, these are the things I've yet to do, as a way of again, making this game be about your unfolding story in this universe.
I agree with you, but for everything you've said, except the last part, your unfolding story, one of the beauties of Eve, and one of the things that makes it really different than other MMOs, is the fact that you're not the hero. You're just another. Granted, you're an immortal. You're the creme de la creme of the human population, but it's you against the universe, and everyone else is in the same boat as you, or at least they started out that way. I think it would be a little trickier to come up with something where you are the hero, you are the one that's going through all this. Not that I'm saying that that's what you're advocating. I think the new player experience hit it just about perfectly, where you feel like, okay, this is all about me because I'm the one who's being thrust into it, and then eventually being introduced to the larger universe, say through an epic arc, say through some of the missions. I think CCP is really onto something here. They could take this, they could develop it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying that you should be a hero by any means. I think that even the relationship of the the MPE at the time, they're like, you're the greatest ever, and then afterwards they're like, good job, I hope to work with you again, which is actually kind of realistic, right? Because like in the moment you might hold the key and then you're the cool person, and then afterwards it's kind of a pat on the back and you're the hero, but then kind of the story moves on afterwards. What I'm talking about is more like not necessarily the hero, but like tasks. Like maybe the Sisters of Eve want you to go look up something in some system, or more of a military mission, content that comes to you as opposed to you seeking out mission or agents, or maybe even just telling you where those, like if you say, I want to do security missions for these guys, and it guides you towards it in a more logical way, instead of making you as he put it, it's a chore to find out how to do what you want to do right now.
Yes, I agree with you there. When I started Eve, it was your ship appears in space, and good luck.
Yep.
Yeah.
We called that was called the "Here's your ship, fuck you" phase.
Yes, yes. I think of Rubik's cubes and things like that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, my son is starting to become very upset. He woke up from his nap, and I was in the computer, and he doesn't understand. So I'm probably going to have to bow out.
Okay, we can do shoutouts just quickly, and we can wrap this down.
Sure. And I'd be glad to come back again if you want to talk about this another time.
Of course, there's so much to talk about here.
I like that.
All right, so my shout out is to Aderon Robotics and to all of the guys that have been making the new guys come in feel welcome. In particular, the new guys. Oh, you can hear him in the background.
He sounds like he's pretty busy, so I'll just go ahead and say I'd like to give a shout out to all the people that are working to preserve the lore. There's so much there in the world, but it takes so much to be able to collate and make it into something that can be distilled down into something that everyone out there can just go and grasp and go, oh, now I understand why, say, the Minmatar hate the Amar so much. It's not just about faction warfare. It's not just about nullsec or being able to fit a ship or set things up in a certain way, but to make it so it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is more accessible. I can actually understand this. So for all the people out there that are working on things like the lore wikis, that are working on books, that are working on stories, and really got to include CCP in this for the work that they've been doing recently. Thank you to all of you.
Do you want to finish up there, Ash?
Yeah, my shout out in particular to all of the new bros who have joined Aderon and really caught the bug. What's been the most rewarding out of all of this is that, like, on Tuesday I'll lead a fleet and teach people how to Plex, and then on Wednesday I'll jump in, and one of the guys I was teaching yesterday is now teaching the next group of people today. So that's the kind of stuff that's really going to make this work out, you know. Alphas banding together, alphas teaching alphas, and alphas maybe teaching us a new way to play the game. So a shout out to Aderon, the guys that make it work, and a shout out to the alphas for finding new ways to play the game.
It's probably by overheating damage controls.
Yes.
Well, I'll give my shout out to my corp. They've been really great this week. We've recently deployed up to the north to go get some content because Delve is oh so quiet. So we're up with our group up there, getting some dank frags, losing a lot of ships, having a good time. So a shout out to those guys. And as usual, thanks for everyone coming to listen live. If you are listening to this in post, we always record on Mondays around 7 o'clock US West or 0300 Eve time. You can check us out if you're listening live and don't know how to catch us in post on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podcast Player, FM, or any podcast app. If you can't find it on there, please message me on Twitter and I will have it loaded up there as soon as I can find that app. If you like the show and would like to support us, we are collecting donations to help improve the show. Thanks to Kale for engineering our new layout, and I tried to keep all the Lego pieces stuck together tonight, and it seemed to hold together okay, but we're going to keep getting it better. And you can follow us on Twitter, at Kale Decadence, at Merida_Eve, at Ashrothi, and at Zendane Eve. And thanks for everyone coming out. This has been the Mind Clash podcast. Everyone fly safe.